Hi, welcome back. Now we are at the closing keynote of day one, and this is attended by two AppSec industry luminaries, people that I have huge respect for, and ones that I believe have done a great deal of contribution to creating awareness about the importance of AppSec and then furthering the organization's journey towards AppSec maturity. They are none other than Tanya Janca, CEO and founder of 𝗣𝗕𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃, and then we have Vandana Verma, who is the global chair of OWASP, the first women chair of OWASP. OWASP, as you know, is at the forefront of creating awareness and education about the importance of application security. Vandana also is a security relations leader at Snake. So now let's take a look at the fireside chat that they're going to have about DevSecOps. They're going to talk about the best practices and also the worst practices. Come, let's take a listen.
Hi, and welcome to the DevSecOps Fireside Chat with myself, Tanya Janca, and my friend Vandana Verma. We're going to talk about DevSecOps, but don't worry, there's no fire. Vandana, would you mind introducing yourself to everyone so they know who you are?
Sure. Thank you so much, Tanya. First of all, I would say that I'm honored to be speaking with you at this keynote. And about me, I'm Vandana, and I'm currently working with a company called Sneak, SNYK, and I'm also serving on OWASP board. That's a little bit about me. How about you, Tanya?
I am the CEO and founder of 𝗣𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗿, a giant online community dedicated to helping people learn about how to create more secure software. And yeah, just like Vandana, I blog and do lots of things. And we've known each other for a very long time through OWASP, which is another community similar to the Purple Book community and 𝗣𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃. So I was hoping today we would talk about DevSecOps. Did we want to define it first so everyone knows what we're talking about? Did you want to, or do you want me to?
I would want you to, because I remember we were talking about it. So I would let you do that.
So I personally consider DevSecOps to be all the security goodness that happens within DevOps. So it's us application security folks. We want the same things. We want people to release more secure software, but we change the way we're doing stuff so we can weave the security through all the nice processes that the DevOps folks are already doing. So instead of us being like, stop, wait, change what you're doing, jump through these 47 hoops, instead we're trying to adjust ourselves to work with them instead of against them.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just add a small thing to it. Like, imagine you're cooking a meal, and with DevSecOps, you make sure that you use fresh ingredients, clean utensils, and follow all the proper hygiene practices right from the start. You don't want to wait until the end to worry about food safety. Similarly, in software development, DevSecOps make sure that all the security checks are met with a regular check of vulnerabilities, secure coding practices, and the whole process.
I love that, actually. That I feel like that's an analogy that every person can understand because everyone has to cook, right? Oh, I'm stealing that. I'm gonna use that. That's great. And so when Vandana and I were trying to figure out what to talk about, I was like, well, what if we go over some of the best practices and why they're best practices? And the first thing that was on our list for both of us was, when should we break a build and when should we not break a build? And I'm wondering if you can explain what breaking a build means, because not everyone knows what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So when we talk about breaking a build from a security perspective, because we can break the build or we cannot let the development team or the whole pipeline go any further. For example, we start off with design. We start off with, then we move to coding or threat modeling, and then coding, and then we move to the QA stage and then go to production. There are multiple different cycles that are there. So at any of the stage where we see any issues, we stop there, fix those issues, and move further. So when we stop there, that's called breaking the build. And when we talk about from a security perspective, or it has to be very, very caution. Like, we have to take very much caution around it, because when we are talking about breaking the build or the boy who cried the wolf, we need to be taking care of the critical vulnerabilities first, if there are any. We cannot say that if there's a false positive, we have started to talk about, let's break the build. If there is a compliance violation in the project, or if there is a exploitable security weakness, maybe insecure cryptographic algorithm, or maybe a code injection or malicious code, which I've seen a lot these days in open source. So that's very, very important. And on top of it, when I talk about open source, 80 to 90% of the code on the internet is open source. So we have to be very, very sure on that. Now, Tanya, do you think there are certain issues where we should not break the build at all?
Yes. Okay. So I have worked with tons of companies where they don't break the build because they're not ready yet. So they just bought some new tools. They haven't had a chance to make sure they work perfectly. And so they just put it in alerting mode for several months. And they start fixing things that, the alerts come up and they're working on them, but they're not going to stop every new build that goes to prod. Because what if you're scanning a really old app, Vandana? What if the app is old enough that it would be able to vote in an election? Right? So the app's like 18, 19 years old, depending upon where you live. And then it's going to have some problems the first time you scan it. And if we just start breaking the build on every high or critical vulnerability, we'll never be able to get our new fixes out the door. So that's one time that I would think not breaking a build makes sense. What about you? Like, when's a good idea or a bad idea?
I would say if it's really critical vulnerability. And then breaking the build should come when we have a certain maturity level, which means let's start thinking that we are at a 0 stage. And then we are maturing. We have started to automate things, because automation is one key aspect where we can attain greater heights, where we can leverage people for innovation, and then start breaking the builds. So let's start understanding we are at the 0 level. We will not break anything. As you mentioned, let's sniff everything.
Yeah.
Understand what is our appetite, right? And then start doing that. Once we feel, okay, now we have stabilized our false positives, now we have less issues, and where we are understanding that, because every now and then, if there is a high alert, which is not actually high for our environment, we cannot break the build. We will only be delaying, and developers would only hate us more.
Yes, I have definitely learned that if you break the build basically all the time, people turn off your tools. But that brings me to the next topic we both wanted to talk about, which was like when we pick a new tool. I mean, maybe I'm backing up a little bit from the point, but like, how do we decide on a new tool? Because I remember you talking about this. I've seen so many webinars with Vandana, like I have seen so many. So, but like when we pick a new tool, we want to make sure all sorts of things, like that it has a low false positive rate in general, and we want it to run fast. But I also feel like when we pick a tool, in my opinion, like I want the devs to not hate it. And if they could like it, that would be spectacular. Like what types of, I'll let you speak.
No, I totally agree with you, because how good it would be if we start using the tools that they have, or integrate security practices with their tools. For example, understanding what tools are they using, and then adding something to it. I'll give you an example from an OWASP perspective. Whereas if you have a lot of dependencies in your code, which we generally have, tons and tons of dependencies. So how about using OWASP dependency checker first? I am no hate of any commercial tool, but how about having the open source tool first, understanding what do we really need. I have seen friends who have actually bought the tool, but it's of no use. So understanding what do you need first by using these open source tools, then going ahead and buying the commercial tool. Obviously, they have an edge because there are latest and greatest technologies from AI to whatnot they are providing you. So the best thing is, let's start with open source and know what you have in your house. Because if you don't know and you keep buying the tool because it's fancy in the market, especially like when DevSecOps started picking up, everyone said, oh, they're doing this way. So no two companies can have a similar structure because they use different languages, different way of pushing the pipeline. They may be having multiple sprints in a day, weeks. So everyone is different. So let's understand what we really need. And developers can only help us gauging that. So maybe enabling them and engaging them with us with these tools, or maybe using the tools which they actually use. I think that's one way to get started with that and let them not hate the tooling more from a security standpoint. What do you think, Tanya?
I like that idea. I like especially figuring out, so if they work like this, can I find a tool that works like they do? I remember working with a company and they had a CI/CD pipeline and they would release their code that way. But they're like, listen, we only run it every second Friday. And if you fail the build, it's really embarrassing. And so we need a tool where, yes, you put it in the CI/CD, but we need to be able to run it in our IDE so we can check first and we can force it to run on the new stuff. And then we feel good, like we've passed all the tests. Then when we go to run the CI/CD, it's sort of like an emergency check, like in case something got missed. Because if we fail the build, everyone makes fun of us. And I was like, oh no, I did not know it would be used in like a social way. And so when I picked a tool for them, I had to get one where they could run it in their own IDE and we could automate it in the CI/CD. And like, yeah, that's what they needed. And so the tool I had originally wanted to buy, it didn't work in the IDE. And so we didn't get that one and we compromised on another one. But then they loved it. And I loved it because they used it.
That's right. And if they start using it, they can do half of the issue. They can fix half of the issues in the like development cycle itself. Now, Tanya, I have a question for you, because this is one thing that actually a lot of people ask me as well. Now, when we talk about issues, because developers love it, but there are still huge number of issues that come in. So how to make sure that we don't end up with like a huge number of bugs or backlog of these security issues, especially while we talk about DevSecOps, we're talking about automation. Still, there's like a tons and tons of bugs that are still unresolved.
I feel like there's a bunch of different ways to deal with this. So one of the ways is buying a tool with less false positives and tuning it so that you can have fewer false positives and suppressing things that look like false positives. So for instance, there was a tool I was using on an API and it said, well, you don't have any authentication. And I was like, well, we're using the API gateway for that. And so then it's okay that I'm just doing like access control within it with the authentication, and the main authorization was being taken place with that API gateway. So I was like, okay, so let's suppress that from now on and not run that test because we already know it's good. And so that's one way we can do that. It's like going through and figuring out, well, my architecture defends against this, or I have another thing like a compensating control that mitigates this or reduces the risk to almost nothing. So that's one thing. Another thing is threat modeling and figuring out which things we actually think might happen and then cleaning up those bugs. Because if something, so I remember talking with someone and they're like, we have this critical vulnerability, like we have an SQL injection in this app. I'm like, well, the app's internal only. We only have 100 people that have access to our intranet. And the rest of our security is completely ridiculously terrible. And so if they wanted to steal stuff from the database, they could just go get it. They don't need to do a fancy SQL injection. So normally an SQL injection is really scary, but it's like, if someone already has the keys to the kingdom, why are we worried they're going to make some technical hack and attack something? So I feel like then we can see what the real risks are, and that can help us. What about you? What do you think?
I think I'm totally aligned with you. That I think, and the point that you mentioned that if you have the keys to the kingdom, why would you actually do the fancy hacks, right? Why do you want to spend some time on it, right? Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And then one thing I think we all should be doing is prioritizing bug fixes. We cannot just load people with bugs. We have to tell them, okay, these are the bugs that we need to prioritize and fix early, and then go ahead and move the mountain. Because if you start moving the mountain, you cannot do it. You need people to do that. And you need bandwidth and whatnot. And when we talk about fixing the bugs late, it even more becomes really problematic. So we have to think how much bandwidth we need. Can we spend these many hours, 2 days and whatnot? So let's start prioritizing for anyone and everyone.
Yeah, I also find that sometimes the reason why, I just thought of this while you were talking, sometimes the reason why people aren't fixing bugs is because the change management process is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but complete hell. And getting a fix out, especially like when you're during that system development lifecycle, you know, if QA finds something, you just fix it because you have it open, but getting permission to open an old app and do the entire QA process, all the approvals, going to meetings. I find that sometimes it's like, well, it's not worth doing that for just this bug. It's going to cost so much money in meetings and so much money in time that they're just like, I'll do it next month. And then it's been like 4 years. And so speeding up that process can be a thing that the security team can do to help enable more bug fixes actually getting out into prod.
I totally agree with you. Like, if we start communicating and collaborating, half of the problem is solved. I think that's where the miss is. Right, Tanya?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So another item that was on our list of things we wanted to talk about was how to ensure the rest of the system development lifecycle is also secure. So not just the part in the CI/CD, but the rest of it. And I feel like Vandana has lots to say about things we can do.
Yeah, Anya, I have actually learned a lot from you in this perspective as well. Now, when I talk about software development lifecycle and the whole phase itself, first thing, let's start talking to each other. Let's start collaborating. That's the first phase. And rather than requirements or design phase, I say that let's start getting to know each other. Then only we can understand what are the requirements and what are the security requirements early in the project. Then we can only do the design, because if we start saying, oh, there is a flaw in the design, or there is this in the design, they will never understand. Especially most of the input validation issues can be fixed in the design phase itself. Like, you must be thinking like, why not coding? But then design, where we're talking about authorization, authentication. Now, while we talk about other phases where we do coding, testing, and whatnot, one important aspect is that we tend to not monitor what we have set up. Let's start monitoring. Let's start understanding what we have set up. The whole life cycle, or maybe what we have talked about, you might be knowing it. But then continuous integration, continuous monitoring is one important thing that we tend to still miss out. Or I've seen people saying, I have a pipeline set up, but then everything is broken down. So you have SAST, DAST, SCA, everything, but all are separate. I think that thing needs to be collaborated, joined. You don't need to fail the bill, but at least join so that you have the visibility, what is there, and reports. Take a quick look at the report, what is happening. And another interesting aspect is that training and awareness, where people feel, oh, that could be just one tick box. No, that is not it. We need to start understanding what we really need. If you are a developer, you can be one person or a person who's better than the security person. Let's put it this way, because you know the environment well than a security person. Like if I asked Tanya to fix a bug, she would do it better than me. She's been developing all her life, right? She knows the environment so well. When I see her speaking about DevSecOps and SDLC, I can so understand, like, she knows what she's speaking about, and she can fix it like maybe in few minutes, few hours, right? Or I'll just be sitting on days. So I would say that those sessions should happen. And another thing is that what I've learned from my previous gigs, that we should start asking our own teams to fix each other bugs. Not to name shame, but we have these bug bounty programs. Why not start doing that within the team? Rewarding is one thing that helps everyone. If somebody rewards me, I would be very happy. Why not doing that, right? If someone appreciates me, it makes me feel good. And then if we start doing it for those people who are actually working on that, so some little maybe good work or something, or maybe some coupons or something, we can do that. I think that's really helpful. What do you think, Tanya?
I think all of those things are helpful. So this reminds me of, this was in 2013, so a whole decade ago. I remember going to the project kickoff meeting, and there was our security person, and she's like, hi, I'm your security human, and I'm going to help you the whole way through the system development lifecycle. And this is called the partnership model. This is one of the many ways you can do AppSec. And she's like, I might not know all the answers, but I I will never give up on you and helping you find the answer. And she was amazing, Vandana. And she followed us through, and she would just check in on us like maybe every month and be like, hey, is it time for a pen test yet? Or, hey, you're doing that? Like, let's talk about it. And sometimes she would say, I don't know the answer. Let's book a meeting and brainstorm, or let's find some time to research together, or whatever. And the whole way through, she would never give up on us. And basically the organization I was working at as a dev had decided to adopt this brand new model, because before her, it was the department of no, Vandana. All they would say is like, no, 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 no. And I'd say, so you're telling me I can't do this? And they're like, yes. I'm like, what can I do? And they're like, well, you should know. I'm like, well, if I did know, don't you think I'd be doing it? So instead of treating me like a 4-year-old, why don't we talk about what I can do? And they're like, well, that's your problem. No, actually, it's our problem. And so, like, if we can have a security person show up and help them threat model, have a security person show up and look over their architecture with them and offer potential improvements, like, hey, you're doing this and this. Is there encryption here? Because I would like it better if there was.
Yeah.
As soon as you ask it, you see the look on their face and you already know the answers. Like, they're like this, they're like, it's probably no.
Yeah, absolutely.
One
I
thing
agree.
I wanted to ask about before we go on to the next topic was, so we talked about how sometimes tools don't work so well. I'm wondering, like, what can we do to try to ensure they run faster, or we get lower false positives, or just like anything so that the devs, it's less friction causing with the developers? Is there anything we can do to like roll out tools or anything to make it like slightly easier on them?
I think automation is one key aspect when we talk about less false positives, because if it's a tool, it will show up or throw up false positives. But one thing to remember, it should not do false negatives. That can be really hard on us. So we'll have to understand the tool if it's really fitting into our environment by evaluating it, whether we really need it. So I've seen that every company offers freemium or evaluation before you even buy it. So let's start evaluating what these tools actually do, what functionality it can help us, what functionality of the tool can help us, and whether it can integrate in our environment or not. Because if it does not, then it's as good as nothing, right? Or a waste. So let's start understanding whether it fits our checklist. If not 100%, but at least 80 to 90%, it should does that. There's no tool which is 100% perfect. We know it, like the breaches are inevitable. We cannot avoid them. They will happen. Every time we fix something, there's something new that comes in. So I think evaluation of the right set of tool can help us reducing. Another thing is that maturing the ecosystem, because there are multiple tools that actually help you refine those things. Let's say when you are scanning, there are false positives. You mark them as false positive because you have evaluated that. Now, when the scan again happens or delta scan happens, they wouldn't show up, or they would be marked as not of high concern, not of maybe a concern. So you can just get rid of them. That's when you are moving towards maturity. And then you need to actually tell the tool owner as well, because they are also maturing with you, or involve them or engage them as well. I've seen many companies opening up APIs where you can integrate it within your system and then reduce those false positives. It's just a little bit of work with them, but then actually that pays off very well in the long run.
Nice. I've also seen tactics like, maybe we'll test everything when they check in their code. We'll run a whole big, huge scan, but then in the pipeline, we'll just check things we're really worried about. Or we'll just check the part of the code that changed and not the rest of the app because we don't have time for that, but run a whole scan every month or something outside of the pipeline where we know it's going to take a while. I have so many more ideas, but I realize we are running out of time. And so I was wondering so you talked about education and learning, and people are watching this probably because they want to learn something new. And so I was wondering if you could give a couple free resources, and then I could give a couple, and then we could wrap up.
do check out my YouTube channel where I talk to the wonderful leaders like Tanya, and I share a lot of resources around application security. Also, do keep a check on my book is coming out soon, which is DevSecOps in Action.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Who's publishing it so we can go and find it? Or how do we find it?
It's by Pact. It's by Pact. It'll be on Amazon, and I will be start sharing the links soon.
Oh, that's so exciting. Yes. Okay, so I also have a YouTube channel and a blog and a TikTok and a podcast. But basically, if you look up She Hacks Purple, that's me. And if you look up 𝗣𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, that's my company. And so if you go to community.𝗣𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, you will find my giant online community that has free courses, and it has like events, and we do all sorts of things. And we have had, I believe we've had you on our podcast before. And yes, we do all sorts of things. But anyway, I'm a little bit off topic. Another really good resource is the Purple Book community. So if you are watching this and you haven't joined, you probably should. Because if you like this, you're probably going to like a lot of the other stuff they do. And so following Vandana and I am following the Purple Book community so you can see what they're up to. I've been a part of lots of their events, and I have to say A+ all around. Very fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there's one key thing that you wish people would remember from this fireside chat, what key takeaway would you like them to have?
There's no single time where you say that, when should I start? Where should I start? You can just start from where you are in DevSecOps, and you can just pick up the pieces that are broken and you can stitch them together. I think that's what I would say.
I like that. I'm going to steal my key takeaway from things Vandana said, where I think the key to doing DevSecOps well is communicating and talking with the developers and the ops folks and just checking in with them and verifying things with them. Because if we're not talking to them, there's a good chance we'll collide into them in a not wonderful way. And so, oh my gosh, thank you, Vandana, so much for being on this fireside chat with me. It is way more fun with you than just trying to do it solo. Thank you, AppSecCon, for having us and the Purple Book community. And I think it's time for us to say goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.